I'll be honest, coming in, I wouldn't have picked kid crimes.
Dealing with the crimes against children who really, in a sense, they really can't defend themselves.
Right. I will say that once I got in, I'm like a fish in the water. So like I'm all in. I dive in and I really figured out, I was like, man, these cases matter. Like these cases really matter.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Longcode Podcast. Today, our special guest is investigator Tony Godwin, who's over our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. He has over 20 years experience investigating these cyber criminals preying upon our kids, and we're going to talk about so many different things. He's widely regarded for what he's done in this industry. He's a key go-to expert for so many people across the country and across the world, and so we have so much to share today, so let's get into it.
You are clear for Longcode.
Tony, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Man, well, let's first of all talk about who you are. You've been at the police department for a while, but who is Tony Godwin? How did you end up at the police department?
Yeah, that's a loaded question a little bit, but generally speaking, I joined the police department after I had a little bit of a career in the military. I never had any intention growing up of being a cop. But I always anticipated I would go in the military. My dad's retired military. My brother's in the military. My mom was in the military a long time ago. And so I kind of always knew I would land there. So when I went to go testing, I wanted to be like an engineer, an architect or something like that. I like to do a lot of stuff with my hands. And I took some tests, and the guy was like, hey, do you want to be a military police officer? And I was like, okay. And so that was my real first introduction to law enforcement. And I thought I didn't really know anything about it. I went on to be an MP. Then later on, a little ways down in my career there, I went into investigations. And that's what I fell in love with, was investigations. And so a long time ago to date myself here, during Desert Storm, when it first kicked off, 1990, I met some Fort Worth cops. They were activated in a reserve unit. They came down to Fort Hood where I was stationed. And because they were already cops for a number of years, they came into our office and then worked cases, and they were there for about a year. And so they're the ones that basically told me, like, hey, why don't you come up here to North Texas and apply? And I was like, okay, like I don't even know what the process is, And so they basically told me, what to do. And, oh, you'd be a shoo-in, no problem. You already got 5 years of experience and blah, blah, blah. And then I learned that is absolutely untrue. When I showed up for a first test, there's 900 people in a room to take a test back in the 90s. And I thought, wow, this is not just I'm going to walk through the door kind of a thing and get hired on.
900 people.
Oh, that was a minimal one. I went to one for Plano PD, and there were 1,600 people there for a test.
Wow. And
I remember their chief saying, thanks, everybody, for coming out. We have 5 openings. I'm just letting you know. And I was looking around the room, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to be working here. Like, I'm not going to be number one on this list. I can already tell.
It's interesting how you talk about that back then, because today it's completely different as far as recruiting. But back then, 900, 1,600 people in a room for 5 spots.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? And there were so many people just eager to get in, and so I learned at that point, like, okay, I don't know anything about North Texas. I just started applying to a bunch of different PDs, which is what you did back then. And so I was in the running for Fort Worth PD, and I was in the running for Garland PD, and so Garland was the first to respond. And so I've been here with Garland now for 32 years. I joined this field as a career. I didn't join it as a job. I knew I would be here for 30 years. I didn't know what I would be doing or where I would be, but I absolutely knew in my mind, I'm not leaving here before I have 30 years.
So in your mind, you're like, I'm a police officer. I'm going to be a police officer, and this is going to be my career.
100%. And, I didn't know what really to expect in that realm. I loved patrol. I worked in patrol for 12 years and worked the late night shift the whole time. I worked 1 day shift rotation, which I couldn't stand at the time because I was probably a 5-year guy. And they certainly were like, okay, young rookie, like, slow your roll. This is how we do things on days. And, at the end of the day, it was a good experience. I got to be around a lot of good people. I mentored under a lot of people. And but my real desire was to go inside the CID.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of people's perception is like, oh, I want to be a detective.
Yeah.
They don't think about, what it takes to become a detective.
Yep.
Because ultimately in law enforcement, patrol, that's the foundation. You can do everything as a patrol officer, but then you move into the specialty positions based on your experience and things to that effect.
Yeah, and it's great. Patrol is fantastic. I'm not knocking on it a bit because, as you said, it is the backbone of the department. Like at the end of the day, they're the ones that are coming. When you're in trouble and you're calling 911, those guys and gals are the ones that are coming, and they're the ones that are going to save the day. They do real hero work every single day. I just knew with my past experience in investigations, I was like, man, I really like that. That was cool. I can make an impact. I always wanted to do that, and so it took me a little while, but I finally got in.
How many years were you in patrol before you actually moved around? Actually, let's talk about all the positions you've held here at the police department.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really held many. I was in patrol for 12 years. I put in for CID 10 times.
Now, CID is like a blanket because there's several divisions within CID.
Yeah, and here we don't really get much of an option. Like you just put an inquiry in to say, hey, I'm interested in investigations. Maybe I kind of lean towards homicide, or maybe I lean towards property crimes or forgeries or this or that or auto theft. You may have a desire, but it doesn't really mean that's where you're going to land, at least not here. It's all based on openings and availability and whatnot. So I finally got it on my 10th try, and I thought I was getting pranked, I'll be honest, when they called one of the old assistant chiefs who's retired. He's like, hey, it's so-and-so, you got the job. And I was like, who is this? Who put you up to this, Chief? Come on. But my opening when I got in was youth crimes. And so I landed in youth crimes. I was there for 2 years. And, I'll be honest, coming in, I wouldn't have picked kid crimes. It's not really it is more than what you think it is. Coming in, you just have this whole sort of idea like, oh, this is going to be really difficult stuff.
Dealing with the crimes against children who really, in a sense, they really can't defend themselves.
Right. I will say that once I got in, I'm like a fish in the water. So like I'm all in. I dive in. I learn everything I possibly can learn. I'm just a sponge seeing how people do it. And then I really figured out, I was like, man, these cases matter. Like these cases really matter. And I always envisioned like I would want to work homicide. I would want to work, officer-involved shootings and like all the big stuff, you know. And but once I started working kid cases, I was like, this makes an impact. You're changing lives. You're helping save kids. You're doing so many different things. You're kind of taking some families apart because of the horrible things that are going on within it. But in that same process, you're putting a kid back on a path of restoration. And that's like very impactful.
It's so true. And just for those who don't know, CID stands for Criminal Investigation Division. We'll use acronyms, but we want to make sure that you understand what we're talking about here. Yeah. I think to your point, so many officers have a perception as to what is a youth crimes detective and the kind of crimes that it deal with. And I think we tell ourselves that it takes a special mindset to actually be able to investigate those crimes because there's a lot of emotions.
There is, yeah. I mean, you're dealing with the worst of the worst. You're dealing with that child's worst day of their life. And unfortunately, it's a lot of hands-on stuff. It's a lot of physical stuff. It's a lot of emotional stuff. It's a lot of abuse stuff that happens to children every day. And, when you're a cop and almost everybody's married, most everybody's got kids, so you kind of personalize this into your own world, your own family. And so it just digs in a little more. Like you're really going to dot the I's and cross the T's. You're going to do everything that you possibly can because you don't want any hiccups to come down the road, and you don't want anything to happen to this family again down the road.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's so many moving pieces there, and there's so many like major elements to really consider, which was a stepping stone to where you're at today.
Well, yeah, I had one little brief stay. We had an assistant chief who's moved on to another agency now, who came to me and said, hey, I need you to go over and work in, at that time it was called CAPERS, Crimes Against Persons. And I said, well, I'm not interested in CAPERS. I want to go to ICAC, which I'll talk about in a minute.
And ICAC stands for?
Internet Crimes Against Children. And so I had some exposure to ICAC. I was good friends with the guy who was working ICAC at the time, Bruce Marshall, and that's just where I wanted to go. And I can tell you about that in a second. But this chief came to me and he said, hey, I really need you and your experience to go over to CAPERS. And I said, well, if the opening for ICAC comes up, I'm going to apply. And he said, absolutely, no problem. I I'm not going to hold that against you. So he's like, if you'll do me this favor, I'll remember that down the road. And that's exactly what happened. So I did go for a year, and I worked mostly robberies. I helped out on some homicides and some other kind of things. And it was a really good experience. It gave me an opportunity to see just a different roadmap for how things are done. Still victim-based in that sense. You're still dealing with families who have gone through their worst day ever. So it was good. It was really good. But my heart was leaning towards ICAC, and there's kind of a funny story on how that happened. So Bruce Marshall, who was the guru of ICAC when I was a young buck here,
I remember.
I saw him one day. He was at the copier, and he was in a pair of shorts, like Bermuda shorts, and a Hawaiian shirt. He had flip-flops on, and he had a beard. And I saw him, and I thought, how dedicated. This guy's on vacation, coming into work and like making copies. And so I said something. I was like, Bruce, what are you doing? You're here on vacation? Like, what's so pressing you couldn't wait till you got back? And he goes, I'm not on vacation. And I was like, well, why are you dressed like that? And he said, I look at the worst stuff on the face of the earth. He goes, they don't give me any guff about what I wear. And I said, well, I want to dress like that. And
I want to be on vacation every day.
And he looked at me, and words that I have said to many other people since is, be careful what you ask for. And I said, that makes a lot of sense. And so Bruce got to a point, he had been in it so long, he got to a point where he's like, hey, I've reached my limit. I'm out. I'm going to get out. I'm going to end in patrol. Started in patrol. I'm going to end in patrol. And his opening was coming up. And so I put in for it, went through the whole process, me and a few others, and I got that.
See,
So,
that's a great story because, I mean, you know, you had a vision of what you really wanted down the road, but it wasn't one of those things you can snap your fingers and all of a sudden be there.
absolutely not.
And I think a lot of times people have that misperception in regards to, hey, if I want to be this, you can become that. No, there's a lot of things you have to do to actually build your resume. You got to stack your skills and prove yourself and show that you are willing to do that. And you had a passion for it. So you actually put in the time. You did the research. You, as you mentioned, you like just jumped in 2 feet and just soaked in all the information so that you could be a better detective.
Yeah, without a doubt. I was blessed to have the chief allow Bruce to come and work directly with me to kind of show me the ropes. So I think I had him for just under a month, and then he went back to patrol and did his thing, and then he ended up retiring. But you know, during that time frame and leading up to that time frame, you know, there's all kinds of things that you don't know what you don't know. And so there was all kinds of trainings I had to go to, and I was getting scheduled for trainings all over the country. And, you know, people around here were like, oh, look at you. You're going to, you know, whatever, Vermont, you're going to Florida, you're going to California, like a world traveler. And I said, yeah, but I'm going for a reason, because there's core courses and there's things that you have to know, and there's things that you have to do. Like the reality is I got the position, but I couldn't really do the work other than until I had all these core classes that I had the training, the proper training, and the rules that I got to follow. And so like I wasn't really close to touching a case for almost a year. Right. I did mostly training for a year. And so even in that vein, it's difficult. I got to leave my family for 2, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks at a time sometimes. And I got to go immerse myself into this training session and learn from those who have paved the path for me. And so I just jumped in,
And there's so much depth there because, some people, even me personally, there's other people in the police department that they don't realize the amount of training that goes in there. Now, to become a police officer, there's a lot of training. You go through 6 months of classroom academy, learning all the books, penal, transportation, city policies, procedural law, and all that stuff. But there's still more. You have to, if you want to become a specialty officer, detective, investigator, then you have to jump through the hoops and get to that point. And to your point, weeks and weeks and weeks, if not, months of training for your specialty position.
Yeah. So what I did during that time frame was, in my downtime between classes, is I was just a sponge. I was like reading all of Bruce's cases. Like I would just go through, and he was so good. He was so gifted. But I will say, and I poke fun at him all the time, but I will say that he was the most unorganized person I've ever met in my life. His case management organization made my head explode.
But it worked for him, though.
But it worked. He knew it. He knew it inside out. I could just show him the file name or whatever, and he could just rattle. Blah, 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 blah. He could just rattle it all off. But organizationally, it was not in any sort of order, which my OCD doesn't really allow for that too well. So, but I just spent time. I just went and got the cases, and then I would just pour through the cases and just try to learn and emulate what was working. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And so he was a great mentor. He's a great friend of mine. We still talk to this day. But it put me on a path that I don't know that there's many that have lasted as long, because I've been in the ICAC world for 20 years now.
Right.
And so that has afforded me a bunch of opportunities across the line, from training, and not only just attending trainings, but now I'm the one that's teaching the trainings. Now I'm the one that's going places to teach cops how to do this job and do it right. I'm a big stickler for the rules. I am adamant that we have to follow the rules. They're in place for a reason. I often tell people when I go train, I never want to see Godwin v. U.S. When I retire and 25 years from now, somebody's saying, oh, we got to do this because of that dumb guy Godwin did something stupid and we can now have this, law across the land or whatever. I never want any part of that. So just do it and do it right, but do it for the right reasons, even when nobody's watching.
I think that's the most important thing to do. I mean, we in law enforcement, we have rules to follow.
Yeah.
There's so many rules we follow. And then, of course, to your point, there's case laws that are developed based on what has happened in the past. And something is seen, and all of a sudden now there's a change, and we have to adapt to that change.
Yeah.
We don't control what's going on around us. We adapt, and we want to make sure that ultimately whatever rules we play by the rules correctly, so that those that are actually victimizing those in the public will be held accountable.
Yeah, and the other side of it, and I get this a lot because I teach to a lot of parent groups and civic groups, and I'll talk the paint off a wall to whoever will listen to me, because I think that's really our only avenue right now is to raise awareness and educate people. And I'm a big proponent of that. And I will often tell parent groups or people that I'm talking to is you have no idea how hard I work to disprove a case just as much as I do to prove a case. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be responsible for someone to go to prison and be convicted and go to prison for a crime that is horrible that they didn't do.
Right.
I don't want that on my conscience. I don't want any part of that. I have already seen enough horrible things in this world that I can never unsee. And that's the reality of what has to be done in this job. The last thing I want is to have something on my conscience that I put someone who possibly didn't do something in prison. I don't want that.
And that's always a good model to have going forward when you conduct your investigations. You want to make sure you have the proper evidence and that you are actually investigating the correct person involved with this crime.
Yeah, 100%. To steal a quote from one of my buddies, Brandon Poor, who I do a podcast with myself, he has often said, we're never going to arrest our way out of this problem, ever. And that's very true. We never are. So we have to change the paradigm. We have to change the mindset. We have to educate more people. The more people we talk to, the better it is. The more they understand, the more they know to look. And with technology and with changes, it's evolved. It's becoming that way. Parents are getting so much more involved in paying attention and using different softwares to help them out,
And I want to go there because I think that's a really important part of this discussion in regards to the kind of crimes that you're investigating and how ultimately parents and family members and the community can be involved to ultimately prevent this from happening. Because it's going to happen, to your point, we're never going to arrest our way out of the problem. Right. So the next best thing is to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Try to, That's all that we have on the table. And I think it takes, I know that there's professionals all over the country that work in ICAC, and the task force as a whole is humongous. And in Texas here alone, it's huge. We have thousands and thousands of cops all over the state that are doing this day in and day out. So I've been very, very blessed and very fortunate to work for an agency like Garland who has taken care of me. And some people here say, "Oh, you're the golden boy," and I'm like, "No, I'll put my work ethic up against anybody.
Right.
I put the work in because it matters,
Right.
and if it changes a path or a trajectory and puts a kid that's gone through something terrible back on a good path, then mission accomplished. If it puts a bad guy in prison that needs to be in prison so he can't do something to another child, so be it." So at the end of the day, my loyalty to this department is I hope it's unquestioned, because I'm a huge proponent for Garland PD. I'm constantly pushing people, apply. This is the best job in the world, is it not?
It is.
Like, it's
amazing.
so
Yes.
fun. Like, you can have so much fun, and you can grow, and you can do so many good things.
There's so many opportunities. We had I had Rickus Jones on here. He went from patrol to recruiting, and he talked about how there's so many different opportunities at the police department, and each position requires a potential change in mindset, because you can't have the same mind from a patrol officer to an investigator to a recruiter to a community relations officer. And there's so many different aspects of it, and there's so many opportunities here.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, for those who don't want to actually sit in an office, becoming a police officer is the place for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's your day is different every day.
Yeah.
It's never the same 2 days in a row. It's a great job. This is a great department, and I feel very fortunate. I do not go without here. If there's something I need, the department will get it for me. If there's a tool I need to help me do the job, they will fill my tool belt up with whatever gadgets I need to help me get that done, without question.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's an easy pill to swallow. At the end of the day, they take care of me.
No, I think one of the emphases that the police department does, especially the Garland Police Department, and I truly believe this, is that they will invest in what's necessary to allow us in our succeeding to getting the criminals off the street and keeping our community safe.
Yeah, and it's got to be a difficult pill to swallow from the city side, from the department side, because the job that I'm in is, generally speaking, what people would consider an undercover role, like the types of cases that I do. And so we're not out like publicly shouting from the rooftops, hey, look at what's happening over here. Look what's happening over here. It's a lot of things that are behind the scenes. And so I know that, as the chief of the department, he's probably got to go and just explain to people at different levels to say, we need this. I can't really give you all the ins and outs as to why, but we need this.
Right.
And this is going to do a lot of good. It's going to save a lot of kids, and it's going to put a lot of bad people away. And we got a guy that'll handle it. And historically, that's been my experience.
Well, Tony, to that point, can you talk about what goes into an investigation? Like you get a tip,
Sure.
and then you come in. What happens?
Yeah, so let me give you a breakdown of the types of cases that I typically work in the beginning. So first and foremost, we have what are called reactive cases. Reactive cases mean a parent or an adult figure or a teacher or a counselor, somebody has encountered something that has raised the hair on the back of their neck to say, hey, this looks weird, this looks dangerous, this involves a child and what looks like an adult. It could be conversations, it could be photos, it could be really anything, something inappropriate. The whole adage, see something, say something. So many people do that, and I encourage everybody to continue to do that. So they just file a police report. They just make a police report that says, hey, my child or my nephew, my cousin, my grandson, whoever got this message. It looks creepy. It looks like a grown man, and I want the police to look at it. And so what that does is kick off what we call a reactive report. So that report is made by either a uniformed officer or from the front desk, or they've called it in to say, hey, this happened 3 days ago. And that report goes through the system that it goes through internally, and then it lands in my office. And so I have another person in my office who is training up to be my replacement should I decide to retire, and either he or I will get that case. And so we will then open it up and figure out, okay, what do we have? Where is our victim? Is our victim here in Garland, or is our suspect in Garland? Because we can have either way. So as an example, if the suspect is in Garland and the victim is in Louisiana, or pick a place, we will make contact with that local agency. We'll say, hey, look, we need to get this child interviewed. There's a whole forensic process to that. It's called an MDT. It's a forensic interview. I'm a big proponent of doing it and doing it the right way. When I go teach to places, unless you are specifically trained to talk to a child, to interview a child, to screen a child for anything related to exploitation, sexual abuse, hands-on abuse, anything, if you don't have the training, don't talk to a kid. Right. End of story. If you are talking to kids, if you are interviewing kids, you're doing it wrong.
It goes back to actually following the procedure correctly so that ultimately those committing the crime can be held accountable.
Yep. We have a whole process for that. It was built right here in Dallas, Texas at the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center, It is the tip of the spear in terms of what that is. It's amazing. Now, you talked earlier, you said about evolution, things change, your mindset has to change. I was not always a big believer in that. I thought, listen, I've interviewed thousands of people. I can talk to a kid about something. I know what questions to ask. I know what to say. But then it was explained to me, and I saw it firsthand, and I thought, well, that's interesting, and why put myself in a position that could be compromised, because of lack of training or whatever. So my position on it changed. And so now I am a big proponent. Like, just use the system. You have an MDT system in your area, in your community, in your county, in your city. I guarantee it. Use it. So we begin it, right? If that suspect, all of a sudden he's a Garland resident, now we dive in. We figure out who this person is. Does he have any criminal history? Do we have any involvements with this person? If he's doing it with one child, is he doing it with other children? Mm-hmm. It involves lots of legal process. There may be online accounts that we need to do things with. We need to preserve accounts. We need to issue legal process. We have to connect the dots. I can't just get a complaint that says, oh, Joe Blow over there on Avenue D, he's doing crazy stuff with kids. That's not enough for me to just go and knock on the door or kick the door in and say, I need all your stuff. We have to do the process. And so once we have enough of affirmative link, if we have an offense, we move forward. We get an arrest warrant. We get a search warrant. Kick a door. Take all of the electronics. Sometimes we will make an arrest right there on the spot. Sometimes I'll do an interview right there on the spot. Sometimes it comes later. We take all the electronics. We do a forensic exam of the electronics. We find what we need to find. If we find there's evidence of crime, we get a warrant. We go arrest the guy. That's a reactive investigation. So my office also covers a few other kinds of cases. Cyber tips. Cyber tips, right now, I can tell you, I don't know when this will go out, but I can tell you as of today, we are at 500 cyber tips for the calendar year of 2026. Okay. That is a staggering amount of work.
We're in May. That way people can give an idea.
Yep. So 5 months in, we're 500 cyber tips deep for two guys. And so that's a huge issue, right? Now, what is a cyber tip? A cyber tip is essentially, let me put it in terms that maybe your audience will understand. If you have social media, you have a Facebook account, you have an Instagram account, you interact on that, you post, you make pictures, you do all kinds of stuff, you show what you had for lunch, whatever. A lot of people do all these things. On the side, let's just use Instagram as an example. Instagram is owned by Facebook, which is now Meta. If Meta intercepts something on their side of the house that looks inappropriate, say it's a 60-year-old offender, maybe not even offender, just a 60-year-old guy, a profile of a 60-year-old guy, and a profile of a 12-year-old girl. They say, oh, wait, this looks weird. Maybe a citizen reports it. This doesn't look right. Maybe they find some communications. Maybe they find some photos or chat or anything like that. They bundle it together as Meta, and then they submit it to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So NCMEC is the national clearinghouse for anything related to online exploitation of a child. Anything that involves a child, a computer, a cell phone, a gaming system, the World Wide Web, that's where it goes, NCMEC. Okay. And so that is bundled into what's called a cyber tip. The cyber tip, they do a little bit of triage on it. Okay, the victim's in Garland, the suspect's in Garland, it comes to Garland. So we get those a lot.
Yeah.
As you can tell, from 500 already in the first 5 months, it's a lot.
And those are generated from the actual social media companies.
The majority.
Majority of them. And then they go to NCMEC,
yep,
who basically says, hey, there's something worth looking in, so now let's assign them to the actual police department.
All electronic service providers, the Facebooks, the Metas, the Kicks, the Snapchats, they're all federally mandated to report to NCMEC. And they do. They do it a lot. Now, as a citizen can make a cyber tip.
Correct.
If the citizen encountered something or saw something, maybe a child or a family member, maybe they just said something to them, and the person's like, "Oh, that doesn't sound right." They can go online and they can make an anonymous deal, or they don't have to be anonymous. They can just make a report. That cyber tip will get funneled to an ICAC somewhere in the U.S. Okay. So that's a secondary part of what we do.
Well, there's a lot. So on that real quick, there's a lot of safeguards for social media right now that people may not even be aware of.
A lot. Yeah, there are a lot. Now, I'm going to tell you, there are things that they could do better as far as the providers submitting. But things are getting better. There are companies that are out there that are constantly in communication with all the electronic service providers.
Right.
Like the overwhelming majority, if not all, nobody wants to see a child harmed. Nobody.
Of course.
And so while there's a balance between privacy, consumer privacy, and what they will reveal or give up to the side of the cyber tip for NCMEC, doesn't always balance, but we do things the right way. Right. Anything we don't get on the initial tip, we do in legal process with that company, which gives it to us legally and then gives us the authority to go do what we want to do. So
the investigation's on.
Yeah, and then we're digging, we're looking. And it's a big part of what most of the ICACs around the country do. I would say 80% of the departments, that's all their ICAC does is cyber tips, because there's so many of them.
Okay. I mean, this is great information because, I mean, you talk about the reactive cyber tips and things to that effect. So, I mean, there's a lot to unravel here because,
Sure.
I mean, especially for our viewers, I want to definitely talk about tips and tricks for parents and kids as well to be aware of, but I want to talk about that later on. Regarding, where you are today, you said 20 years in the profession. Things are changing daily,
Every day.
especially with technology. How much faster are things changing today than they were 10 years ago?
I mean, listen, with AI right now, and as good as AI is, it is absolutely changing every day. It's changing how we have to do the job. And sometimes we're a little behind the times, sometimes we're waiting on proven case law, before we make decisions on making changes. So our side of the house can be a little slow, and I don't mean us as the Garland Police Department, I mean as a legislature. Right. Like, the laws are that need a little revamp, or they need a little bit more. At the end of the day, we all need to do a little bit of a better job on that. We need to stay up with this, because currently the way AI is working and the quickness of things that are happening and what we're seeing, we're a little behind the power curve from a legislature standpoint. So
yeah, we got to follow the rules and we got to abide by things, and things are constantly changing, and people make those decisions. So ultimately, we have to kind of wait. But ultimately, that doesn't mean we stop.
Right.
We are constantly looking into these types of tips and reports that are made. So let's kind of rewind now. You get this information. So what is a day in the life of an ICAC investigator, Tony Godwin, do every single day? And how do we ultimately, let's walk through the process, because I think people are really interested in regards to, first of all, how we identify people, which you've identified a couple sources there on how suspects are identified. And what are the steps necessary to actually get them convicted? Because sometimes people watch Hollywood, they watch TV, and they see that, hey, they got arrested in 2 hours' time. But why is it that real life detectives aren't like that? So let's kind of walk through that process and what you do every single day.
So there's two other aspects of crimes that are handled by me and my partner in our office alone I didn't talk about. One, and then I'm going to break it down how the cases go. One of them is what's called peer-to-peer file sharing. And so there are hundreds and hundreds of publicly available networks that people use to share files. Most people use it for music or movies or, photography type things. But there's a very deviant side of file sharing that exists that involves child sex abuse material and the trading and sharing and uploading and downloading of child sex abuse material, which is items involving that child's worst days that were recorded either on video or in pictures. And it's a visual depiction of some trauma that a child has gone through. And these things are traded left and right all across the globe. It is an absolute epidemic. And so we do our best, our level best here to stem the flow. And without giving away any sort of tradecraft on how we do that, we have very specific computers that are law enforcement only, and we troll these networks. And I'll tell you in the simplest way that I can tell you. We have a library of numbers. So every image and every video that exists has an algorithm attached to it. It's called a digital signature, a digital footprint. And it's basically, you can't recreate it. It's a big, long number. And so we know, based on our library, which has millions and millions and millions of numbers, no images or videos, just numbers, but they're all been categorized, and we all know that everything that's in our library is a crime. It equals a crime. And so we have special computers who troll the internet looking for people sharing the files in our library, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
And when we find those people, we connect to them. Because in the file sharing world, you can share files all you want. If you put files in a shared folder and you put it out on the interweb, okay, go ahead, you can. Anybody that also does file sharing can connect right to your computer. You have no idea who's been connecting. I'm just a number to you. My computer number talks to your computer number, and whatever's in your shared folder, I can grab, and whatever's in my shared folder, you can grab. We could just trade things, right? And so that's a very common thing. Again, most people do it for music and videos and photographs, just different things. The dirty side of the internet that involves this type of material is shared a lot. So we basically troll the internet. We look for people. If we find something in our library, we will download it. Once we download it, we will identify a house by a number, by an IP, right? You connect to your internet from your house, from whoever, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever. Well, during that session, when you're connected, you're identifiable based on the IP address that you have. You as a user probably have no idea what that IP number is. That IP number could change 24 hours later. It might be something totally different. Typically, if you're online every day, your IP doesn't change that often, right? They know, okay, hey, Pedro, we've given you this. You check your email, you do a little online banking, you post a few things on social media. You do that very consistently. Say you go to vacation. You take a European vacation, you're gone for a month. You come back home, you log right back in, do your normal everyday stuff. Your IP could have changed during that time. You don't know. So that's how we get somebody identified. That's how we target the fish in our pond.
Right.
So Garland has a pond, and that's what I fish in. I'm always looking. So that's one aspect of another thing. The very last thing that I do, which will lead into your question about what I do on a day-to-day basis, is proactive investigations. Proactive investigations mean I go online, I pose as a child, 10, 12, 13, boy or girl, doesn't matter, and I put myself out there in an environment where children are, and I just wait to be contacted by a predator, and it doesn't take long. And that's, if we fast forward for all of the things that we do in my office, that's what I do day in and day out. That's what I was doing 15 minutes before we started this podcast. I was online. I'm the hottest 12-year-old girl online, I promise you. I don't look like that, but I promise you, I can pull it off very well. Yeah. I've had a lot of experience with it, and I just put myself out there because at the end of the day, it's better that an offender finds me, who thinks I'm a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or whatever age I'm purporting to be, than finding a real child. Right. Because believe me when I tell you, they will find a real child eventually. The odds are in their favor. And so my day and my night, I'll say, because it's not a simple 8 to 5 kind of a thing. My online personas, I chat every day and every night, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter. If I go on vacation, my undercover stuff comes with me. If I am sick, my undercover stuff is with me. It becomes its own animal.
It's a life. I mean,
it is a life.
It's not just a job. I mean, you are the job.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, the job goes with you. And so in a sense, I mean, it's kind of like the entrepreneur thing. I mean, people who own businesses, they're never off. In a sense, when it comes to investigations never stop just because you're tired.
Right. And just to clarify, so the audience that watches understands, like me putting myself out there, people will say, well, you lied. You said you were a 13-year-old girl. You're not a 13-year-old girl. And I say, you're right. I'm not. I'm playing this role. That in itself is not a problem. The courts have said, the Supreme Court has said, just because you put yourself out there in an undercover capacity posing as a child, it doesn't prompt someone who's predisposed for a kid to go and solicit that kid.
Right.
I don't do any of that.
Right.
I just go sit. I just go sit and wait. And it doesn't take long for someone who is predisposed to a child to reach out. And then it begins a conversation. And sometimes it's a short conversation. Sometimes it's very drawn out and long. I have talked to offenders. My record right now, and I'm not proud of this, is I talked to a guy for over 2 years before I actually could get my hands on them and make a case. 2 years of my life for one guy.
For one guy.
But I don't care if it takes 2 years.
Right.
If it's a crime and I can still charge him, I'd talk to him until I'm aged out.
Right.
If it's going to prevent that person from getting their hands on a real kid.
You know, it's just you're bringing up so many interesting topics here and just realities of police work. You know, the fact that, I mean, the people that you're targeting are people that are committing this anyways.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, to your point, if you're not out there, they're going to go actually find a real person and potentially victimize that person, boy, girl, or whatever.
Really good point. Let me clarify something as well, because it made me think of it as soon as you said that. Everything that I do online in an undercover capacity is based on something I know has already happened to a real kid.
Right.
It's based on reality, because unfortunately we get tons of reactive cases where kids have been exploited online, kids have been extorted, exposed to things that they should not be exposed to, and we get those cases and we go through the process. We have a forensic interview. We talk to those children and we say, okay, well, how did this happen? Where did you meet this person? And typically things that happen hands-on happen much more gradual over time because it's typically in the 90 percentile, someone they know. Right. Sometimes it's someone they love. In the online world, it happens exponentially faster because there's this sort of anonymity. They're behind the keyboard. You don't really know who you're talking to. And so things move very, very rapidly online. So everything I do as an undercover is things that I have worked or experienced off of a real kid who's been victimized.
Right.
And so that's how we do it, and that's why we do it. There's an importance to it. Now, there's not a lot of people that are out there, at least here in Texas, that are doing undercover stuff online, posing as kids.
There's
just
not?
There's not as many as you would think. There used to be a whole bunch of us. There's not a ton of them. It's coming back, but again, there's so much other work with reactive cases and cyber tips and the peer-to-peer stuff that occupies a lot of people's time.
Which kind of like reveals the need, you know. I mean, in law enforcement, we're always hurting for staffing. We're always needing people because people are retiring. And so people falling out of the process. So we're always needing more people. And nothing. We have to be on the front lines. The 911 call is the number one priority at the beginning.
Yeah.
What happens after the 911 call, or in this situation, your investigations are 911 calls, but they're in a sense a different type of 911 call, which requires a little more time when it comes to investigating these types of offenses. You observe it, but then you got to get that person in. You got to identify who that person is, find out where he's at, and then ultimately get the warrant, all the evidence necessary to actually put that person in handcuffs and behind bars. Yeah,
definitely not like we see in TV shows where they go from an offense to, guy in prison by the end of the show. That is not how it works. We don't have the technology that is purported in all these kind of things. It's just some of it's reality based, some of it not so much. A lot of Hollywood in there with that. But at the end of the day, we put in the legwork and we do what we have to do, and sometimes that takes a couple days. Sometimes that takes a couple months.
Or 2 years.
Or 2 years.
Right, exactly.
Hey, so Tony, you mentioned you kind of see some pretty horrific things as part of your normal job. Now you have your own family. You have your own personal life. Is there a way that you kind of decompress from the job?
Great question. Yeah, two things I would say is this, and my position on this has evolved over the years. I have been in this department for a very long time. Back when you wouldn't necessarily come forward and say, oh, hey, what I'm looking at's affecting me, at home. It's affecting my personal life, or, it's kind of warping me a little bit. You would never come out and say those kind of things 30 years ago because people would look at you and tell you to rub some dirt on it and get back in the game.
Stigma, still overcoming it.
It's very hard, but I give Chief Brian all the credit in the world. But between what he did and what Dallas PD was doing at the time under Chief Garcia they're like, heck no. Like, we're going to embrace the whole mental health side of this. And so for me, I'm a big proponent of talking to somebody, a professional who says, hey, what's going on? And I explain to them, man, I saw this, I can't get it out of my brain. And they give me the ideas and the techniques that I need to use to sort of put that into place, compartmentalize that to some place that it's not affecting me off duty, right? Because I'll be honest with you, this isn't the kind of job, the job I work isn't, I'm not going home and saying, oh, hey, to the wife and kids, guess what? Guess what I saw today? I'm not doing that because I'm not going to put them through some trauma. So we have a tendency to bury things. So number one is I have no problem talking to a professional. I've done it many times. I will do it many more times. Number two is I have a very serious addiction to woodworking, a serious addiction to power tools. And so I will spend hours upon hours in a workshop to build furniture that I use in my home. I give to my kids who are all grown now. Anything in the creative world, like woodworking, welding, metalwork, painting, drawing. I have a whole sort of savant-like creative side of me, that I've always had. Again, I told you in the beginning, I thought I'd be an architect. I thought I'd be an engineer of some sort. I did not choose this path to go into law enforcement. It chose me. And I feel very uniquely blessed. I'm very grounded in my faith. I'm very grounded with my family. They all know what I do. They're my support system. Because without them, my gosh, there's no way I could last this long.
That's important.
In this job. Oh, that's huge.
It's so important. I think every family handles things a little bit differently. You know, there's some families, spouses that want to hear every single thing. Right. Now, your part of policing is not one that a spouse would ideally say, hey, what'd you see today? But in general, policing in general, there's that different types of communication. Yeah. And, to your point, the stigma of many years ago, 20 years ago when you started, this role here, or even 30 years ago when you started in policing, or even 23 years ago when I started, it was just one of those things that, hey, bad incident, get up, rub dirt on it, get back out there and do your job. Yeah. And today, it's one of those things that ultimately, we have to take into consideration, and we have to embrace that it's needed. Yeah. Because we see things so much that the public does not see. Right. And to your point, you have no problem talking to a professional. And I don't think anybody in police work should have that problem because it's so important for our health, our physical as well as our mental health. It's also good to know that the department has your back in that arena. There are platitudes. Some agencies say the words, but they don't necessarily mean it. There's still the stigma that's involved there. Yeah. That's not the way in this department. Our chief is all in, and it's nice to know that. It's nice to know that, if something comes up and I need to go do something or take a week or whatever, I know I'm going to get that latitude 100%. And I'm super grateful for that. Super grateful. It starts at the top. And to your point, Chief Brian does an amazing job of making sure that you're okay. Yeah. He says it all the time. It's what do you need? Yep. Because, he doesn't know every single police officer on the street, but he's talked to everybody at least one time. And he's out there and he really cares about our mental well-being. That's so funny you say he doesn't. I feel the same way. Listen, I teach all over the place. I teach our police academy. Every year, every academy I'm teaching, anything related to kids, I'm there. They just look different in khakis, and then when they get in a blue suit, I have no idea who they are. I'm like, who are you? I don't know who you are, but I do work here. It's the world we live in, and also the job that you're in. There's certain jobs that, in a sense, you're not interacting with our patrol officers on a regular basis, and that's the majority of our police department right there. But they're the ones actually out there doing that, and so it's so easy to get caught up in that, and that's why it's so important to have all these resources internally and externally, and have these avenues of communication available to you. Oh yeah, listen, they're great. When I get called out to go to certain things, and I get called out a lot. Because another side of things that I didn't talk about is I also do phone forensics and computer forensics for the department. Oh, yeah, that's right. Something I fell into, I'll be quite honest, I don't really like doing it. It's kind of boring to me. But it's something that I fell into that is a necessity for my job, for my specific job. And so at the end of the day, I learned it. I'm glad I have the knowledge and know what to do. It's not my most enjoyable thing to do, I'll be honest. No, I get that. I'm glad we have other people that have picked up the slack. So I basically just have to do my own cases. It's good that you can have a support system, meaning specialized people who do specialized things. That way you can do what you're good at, which is actually out there investigating these types of crimes and getting these criminals off the street. So let's talk about a community story. What is one thing, based on all the things you do, what's one thing, at least one thing, that you would tell the community about the things that you've learned over the years in regards to this type of crime?
Yeah, great question. So number one is I would say pay attention. Pay attention to behavior changes. Now, that's just not a blanket statement to say, oh, your kid had a bad day and, maybe they're being a tyrant that day and you lost your patience or whatever. But consistent behavior changes. Like if your student is, your child's an A student or A or B student, and they're just, involved in like different aspects, like different clubs and things like that. And all of a sudden they have a sudden drop and they're a D student, a C or D student, and their behavior is just a little bit different. That should be a red flag, like something is going on. Maybe they have a brand new friend group that all of a sudden, ever since they started talking to this little group of people, things are different. The attitude's a little spicier, the topics are a little off, like what is going on? Pay attention to those things. Those are red flags. Number two, I would say, is be very intentional. I'll give you an example. A very good friend of mine, Sonia Ryan, I love her to death. She is, in her own words, infamous. Infamous because her daughter, she's from Australia, her daughter, Carly, was the first child in the history of Australia to be kidnapped, raped, and murdered. And this happened in early 2000s when laws didn't even exist. And so Sonia has turned what would be the ultimate tragedy of a lifetime into the biggest triumph, all because of the love of her daughter, Carly. And she started a foundation called the Carly Ryan Foundation, which is humongous. Very generous woman. She now lives here in the Texas area. She's fantastic. She gave me an analogy one time. She said, listen, you would never tell your 11-year-old, hey, here's the keys to the car. How about you run down to H-E-B and pick up some bread and some ice cream, some milk, and just come on back. Just be careful. You would never do that with a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old kid. Yet, we don't hesitate to give them this handheld computer that can go anywhere and see anything for free. They can go anywhere they want. So you as a parent, you've got to be intentional. You've got to have some ground rules. You've got to have some ability to say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to give you unfettered access to the internet because there's a lot of dangerous stuff there. Now, what I'm going to say now is I don't want this to be taken as a replacement. You being intentional, meaning I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to when I say I've encountered a phone that the child uses, which is the parent's phone. The parents are the ones that pay for it. The parents are the ones that provide it. It's the parent's phone, even though the child uses it. And we get that involved in a case. And I ask the parent, well, what's the password? And the parents don't know. Oof. And I'm like, how do you not know the password to your own kid's phone? What if something happens? What if you need to get in there? What if you need to spot check your kid? And I'm a big proponent of that. So have some rules in place. So if the rule is, hey, at 9 o'clock, the phone goes in the basket, which is in my bedroom, and you don't get the phone at night. You don't get to sit in your bedroom unfettered until 2 or 3 in the morning. Nothing good is going on. You should be asleep because you're at school the next day. So be aware. Now, there are programs. There are monitoring programs, and I'm a big proponent of monitoring programs, but it's not a replacement for you, right? One thing that we always talk about when we do parent stuff is you always are concerned as a parent when your kid's about to become a teenager to have the talk, right? The talk about sex or the talk about different things, right? Boys and girls, the birds and the bees, however you want to frame it. Sure. In this world that we live in today, with the amount of technology we have, your kid knows the phone better than you as a parent any day of the week, can get around most things that are on there and hide things from you that you probably have no idea what to look for. You need to have healthy conversations, age-appropriate conversations with your child from a young age. And you need to have them very often. Here's another analogy. When our kids are very young, we tell them about brushing their teeth. You need to brush your teeth. When they're little babies, we put a little soft toothbrush in there and we brush their teeth, right? And then they grow up and they're toddlers and we're like, okay, time to brush your teeth. And we do this 2-3 times a day, right? Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Now they're teenagers. You're like, bro, Have you brushed your teeth today? Go brush your teeth.
Yeah.
We constantly drip on our kids from small to adult. Have you brushed your teeth today? Blah, blah, blah. Why would we not do the same with rules and safety and precautions? Why?
Is it because we take it for granted?
We take it for granted is one. We assume that the teachers in our kids' lives are doing that for us, and they're not necessarily doing that.
No.
Because at the end of the day, this is a tough world we live in. Parents are working 2 or 3 jobs. They're doing whatever they can to make things happen. And when they take their kiddos to school and they drop them off, they're making some assumptions that everything those kids need to know and learn, the good and the bad, are going to be learned in that school environment. And that's not always the case.
Right.
So you have to be intentional.
I think it's an important reminder because, we as parents are the ones responsible.
100%.
And we cannot rely on somebody else to do those, to enforce those rules. Yes, out on the ballot, you want to obviously teach your kids the best way possible how to behave in public and things to that effect, but you also want to talk to them about the risks involved. To your point, the great analogy about the keys to an 11-year-old go to the store and bring back groceries. Same thing with this powerful computer that is more powerful today than ever before, more powerful than any laptop that we had 10, 15 years ago, just because of what it's capable of doing. And sometimes we just don't necessarily think about the risk or maybe it's denial.
I think there's a little bit of both, and I think that's why I learned early on when my buddy and I started our own podcast. It started out like storytelling, and we were just everywhere we go. And I got this idea from my brother, who's a retired cop, but he's everybody wants to hear the stories. Oh, tell us about this, tell us about that. And so we would tell these stories, and then it came up like, why don't you do a podcast? And I was like, well, what's a podcast? This was 6 years ago. I'm like, what's a podcast? And then I got hooked. And so it started out as storytelling, but what we quickly realized and learned is like it's a bigger platform to educate. It's a bigger platform to raise awareness. Because what really blew my mind, and I'm sure you guys see it on this podcast, is the tentacles of how far-reaching this gets.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really rocked my world. Because you see the analytics of where this thing goes and who's listening, what demographic of people are watching. And so for me, when I saw that, and I saw that it was global, I literally saw that people in Russia or China or Latvia or Cambodia are downloading it and listening to it and then sending me an email to say, oh man, you're spot on about this. Like, we need to hear more about this, and like, keep doing what you're doing. And I'm sure you guys are seeing the same sort of stuff. The far-reaching, it's at that moment, that was the pivotal moment for us where I said, holy smokes, dude, like this can have an impact. This can change people's paradigm. This can change their mindset. Like, this is impactful. And
well,
so,
thank you. I think you were blustering us up a little bit more, but your topic, your area of expertise is a global issue. So that's why we're seeing it in other countries as well.
Yeah.
And I think so many people, maybe they don't even think about it because it's been around for so long. Early 2000s when social media really started, Facebook and then Twitter. And now, even YouTube back then. Now we have, to your point, we got Instagram, TikTok, we got Snapchat, and there's so many other ones that I don't even know about.
Right.
My kids have heard about, and I'm like, what is that? Yeah. And so there's so many opportunities out there for people to share something on their phone and it to be reached across the world. And which opens up that door for potential dangers for those who are not educated.
It's not just the normal chat things that you would think of as an adult, like a text message thread or something like that.
Right.
It's video games too, right?
Oh yeah. Gaming is a huge component.
Mobile phone apps.
Yeah, gaming is a huge component. The third-party applications are huge. I'll even say for parents who watch this that have young kids, there are games and applications that are geared towards very young ones.
Can you give us some? Let's just talk about some of these because I think it's important for parents who have young kids and that allow their kids to be on social media. Not that it's bad, but I think it's to your point. Communication, education is always key when it comes to actually.
I'll give you a prime example of one. I actually learned about it from one of our officers here in the department, who came to me, and this is an app. It's called Dog Sim. And it's basically a little app. It's geared towards kids between probably 5 and 10-ish. And you basically create a profile of a dog, like whatever dog you want to be, whatever breed, whatever color, whatever. And then you take that dog and you walk the dog through this little cartoony looking neighborhood, and you go up to people's doors, and there's like dog bowls, and they just eat a little bit of food, and people come and pet your dog and all that kind of stuff. It's a very innocent looking application that little kids just navigate their little dog around a little park and all this other stuff. The officer that brought it to my attention said to me, he said, "What do you know about this app?" And I'll be honest, I'd never even heard of it. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And he said, my kid was on there, and his child at the time was probably 6, 7. And he said, a predator reached out and chatted with my kid on this app and started asking all these personal questions. And my kid was like, I don't know, took it right to dad. I don't know what this means. And he flipped out. And so I literally learned about it that day. I created a profile in an undercover capacity, posing as a young kid, and probably within a day, I was hit on by someone who's predisposed to kids, seeking information. And listen, kids are people pleasers, right?
Yeah.
They just want to, they're just nice to people because they're kids.
I mean, adults and whatever, they they don't know
sweet.
dangers.
They're innocent. They don't know. Nothing's a red flag. So they say certain things. And so keep in mind, no matter the app, if it's dog sim, if it's anything geared towards little ones, do your research. And if I can, this will be the shameless plug I will give. On my podcast, it's called Catfish Cops. I have a resource page on there. And if you go to catfishcops.com/resources, anything on there you can take, anything. We have all kinds of guides. We have all kinds of documents. We have partnerships with different groups. And so we're very proud of it because we try to keep it as like the best one place stop shop you can go to find things. There are contracts that you can do with your kid, and you can put it right on the refrigerator.
I like that.
There's rules.
Awesome. Yeah.
There's contracts.
Yeah.
There's different things.
It's not someone just saying, do this. It's an actual agreement and working together.
It's icebreakers. It's conversation starters.
Right.
It's ways for you to be intentional and get more of a, okay, how was school today? All right. What'd you do today? Nothing. The typical one-word responses you get from your kiddos. Yeah. It's conversation starters. The other side of it is the education side, being, let's say you're a parent and you don't really understand Snapchat. You don't even know really what it is. You know, you've heard of it. You know your kid uses it. We have some one-page fact sheets. One of them is, here's what it is. Da-da-da-da-da. Here's another page that says, here's a way to make it safer for you and for your kid, right? So it's just, again, information that's out there, resources that are there, anything that you want, catfishcops.com/resources.
Yeah, we'll put that on there because I think that's really important for people to know where they can actually grab extra resources and things to that effect. Now, I think there's a lot of these games and platforms and, PS5s or Switch or Xbox or the VRs and things to that effect.
Yeah.
They all have control settings in there. Is that enough?
To a degree, but it doesn't mean it takes over for you spot checking.
I think that's a great point.
Right?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, yes, these games, some of these providers, some of these game platforms, they put things in place. They put ability for you as a parent to put a control around it. Discord's a big prime example. They put things in place where you can set these, but they're very easy to get around, and the kids know that. And so it doesn't replace you physically going in and looking and spot checking and saying, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
Because believe me, what you want is for your child to come to you as the adult, as the parent.
Right. You wouldn't be a trusted source. I think so many people, I mean, they rely on school systems, coaches, and things like to help with the raising, but nothing beats that relationship and that communication and that trust that a parent and child can actually have.
I think I remember something my parents did when I was playing Xbox Live back in high school, going through the connected friends list, and it's like, okay, who's this person?
Yes.
Who's this person? Who's this person?
Yeah.
That's something pretty
That's a
easy to
huge
do.
thing because, back when a lot of kids were using Facebook when it first came out, As we know, all the adults took that over, so we could see what everybody had for lunch and where they went on vacation and all the great things in their life. There's nothing negative, hardly anything negative that ever happens in someone's life, right? Even though their life's in as much turmoil as the rest of ours.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Exactly.
Podcast. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. If you have 900 friends, like, I don't think I know 900 people, let alone 900 to be my friends.
People know you though.
Yeah. The sad thing is, and adults are just as guilty of this today as the kids are. Everybody wants the thumbs up. Everybody wants the heart. Everybody wants the accolade. Everybody wants the, blah, blah, blah.
Kick,
it just feeds it, And so doom scrolling is a real thing. You can lose hours of your life playing online games. You can lose hours of your life just scrolling the TikToks and the Instagrams and all the other things. So it does not replace sitting down and having a meal with your kiddo and having a conversation that are not just yes and no answers. Take some of the resources we have on the site, use that to your advantage. One question I'll ask you, like, what is the room in the home that you think is absolutely the worst room to allow a kid to have a device?
People would say bedroom.
A bedroom is number one. Most people say the bedroom.
Okay.
And I will tell you, bedroom is number two. The worst place,
Living room?
the bathroom.
Oh, okay.
The bathroom. Where else on the planet do you not have a better expectation of privacy than the bathroom, right? When you go into a restroom, you can pretty much anticipate nobody wants to go in there while you're doing your business. Right. So for a kid to go in there with a device, it's a recipe for disaster because they're going to doom scroll. They're going to go do what they're doing anyway. And if they get latched on to the right person who is seeking these out, then it's a recipe for disaster.
That's a great little tip right there. You know what? Let's kind of keep going on that path real quick. I mean, I want to be respectful of time-wise, but at the same time, I think we have multiple episodes in this conversation because there's so much to unravel here. But tips and tricks. I mean, those are some great tips. So what are some other tips and tricks that parents can actually utilize in their day-to-day life with their kids?
Well, number one is just the paying attention alone. Like having the ability to know, okay, I know this is the device you use, and I know the password to get in it because I probably set the password. Or I've set up my monitoring stuff to be able to say, you can't change the password without me knowing that you changed the password.
Is there monitoring on like the device like iPhone or an Android? Or is there monitoring on that parents can use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the plan, depending on the program, there's a bunch of them that are out there, but Apple has good stuff. Androids have good stuff. Right. Life 360 has good stuff. Bark is a really common one. It doesn't get everything, but it gets quite a bit. Right. And it puts some parental controls in place where you can set some boundaries. Okay. But again, this has to be accompanied by continual feedback, continual conversation. We all trust our kids, but we also verify what our kids are doing.
We should.
Do kids lie? I ask people all the time, do kids lie? Most people say, oh, yeah, about the little things. I'm like, okay, well, we trust but verify. We do that every day, right? When I ask my son, did you brush your teeth today, buddy? Yeah, I brushed my teeth. No, bro, you didn't. Yeah. All right. Did you do that homework that you needed to get done? Yeah, I did. Well, why did the teacher call me today? Right? No, let me see the actual work. So we trust but verify.
Be involved. I think that's an important thing. Be involved.
I mean, that's as bare bones as it really gets because gone are the days of, it's just a different era. We just live in a different time frame where this technology is so vitally important. Yeah. And it's important to everybody.
Wow, I think that episode really talked to anyone, young or old. We're all on the internet, so it was really something for everyone.
Absolutely. We just finished up interviewing investigator Tony Godwin. He's over our internet crimes against children, talked about so many things from his walk as a police officer to where he is today, protecting the most vulnerable in our society. He finished it up with giving some tips and tricks. We really hope you enjoyed this. Tune in to all of our episodes moving forward. Subscribe and follow us. We'll see you next time.
You are clear for Longcode.